Hey folks, welcome back to the Wikipedia world, and I am Abhinay Gupta. And today again we will be continuing with the interpretation of statute, deed and document. Right? And I should remind you that yes, this is one of the most important chapters that you need to prepare, right? And this is not important from your examination point of view or your mark scoring point of view, but this is something that you need to know. Being a professional, being a chartered accountant, you have to deal with deeds and documents a lot of times. I mean, throughout your profession, right? This is what is there in front of you, right? And interpreting them in the correct order is very necessary for you to take the correct judgment, right? So this chapter is actually included in your curriculum just to assist you, right, in the interpretation of the deeds and documents that you go through. And if you look at its mark schedule in the past years, it's always been there for somewhere around 4 marks, right? And people think, yeah, for 4 marks, why do we study these things? There are so many hard and difficult terminologies that have been used in this chapter, right? Which is very difficult to remember. Even the name is so difficult to remember. How do we remember the content? And then you go on to define one and the other things. So people find it a little difficult, right? But if you stay with me, stay connected, we'll be taking you throughout the chapter, right? And at the end, you'll realize that this was one of the most simplest chapter for you. Why? Because once you know the meaning of those terminologies, right, your questions in the examination are straightforward. Please explain this, explain this, explain this, explain this. What is the meaning of this, this, this? Right? So we'll do the chapter and we'll also discuss the questions that have been asked in your study material and stuff. Right? So let us start with the chapter. We have already begun with the chapter in the previous lecture, right, where we have understood certain meanings, certain terminologies have been defined over there. Those were the statute, the document, instrument, deeds and interpretation, right? And statute and stuff, they have already been asked in the examination as well. So if any one of you have missed out the first lecture, please go understand these 5 words, because we will be using these words very often or very fluently in the chapter coming ahead, right? So that was about giving you the base about the terminologies that will be used very widely in this entire chapter, right? And now I'll take you through the rules. There are certain rules, the primary and the secondary rules, that you apply for interpretation of the statute, deed and document, which is actually applied by the court. Right? I've already given you the background of the entire chapter, right, in the previous lecture, and I hope you are through it. Why do we need statute? How did it come up? The brief history, background and everything, right? So you need to know that to understand, to get the feel of the chapter, you have to know those background as well. So again, I'm reminding you, if any one of you have missed out the previous lecture, please go attend it and then come back to this, right? Okay, so moving ahead, today we'll know what are the rules of interpretation or construction. So you need to understand that the rules are divided into 2 sections. One is the primary rule and the other is the secondary rule. So the primary rule of interpretation, right, it is again further subdivided into 6 different rules that you apply. And that will be applied depending upon the case, right? It's not that, okay, you are reading a statute, you have a particular situation or a particular text that you need to interpret. You don't have an option that yes, you'll use all the rules over there. No, there are certain rules that cannot be used over there, and there are others like 1 or 2 maximum that will be used, and you have to use the law of that interpretation rule and then interpret the entire statute or the language given in that deed and document accordingly, right? So the first rule, the primary rule, is the rule of literal construction or literal interpretation, right? This is just a grammatical interpretation. If I say in one line, whatever words are given in the statute, read them with the cognate sense of what they mean in the dictionary, right? And then in the plain language, whatever it is saying, right, if a layman who does not have any knowledge about the law, about the statute, if he's reading it, what will he interpret is the rule of literal construction, right? We're not going to the background, we're not listening, we are not thinking about anything in it. It's just the plain text over there, right? Next, you will have the rules of reasonable construction, where you'll have to apply your logics. Reasonably, what should be there? right? Don't go by the bare text, okay, the text says this. No, but the text can be wrong. or maybe the interpretation can be different, right? And that will be based on the reasonableness of that text, right? Yeah, don't worry, we'll be dealing with these things in detail, right, later in the slides. Here I'm just giving you the brief about what are the rules over here, right? Then you have a rule of harmonious construction. And harmonious construction, when we say, so harmonious construction basically is when there are two different rules, right, or there are two different law on the same matter, right, that one section says something else and the other section says something else, then what you try is that you apply both the sections harmoniously, right? Like for example, if penalty, if one section has a limit of rupees 1 lakh and other has a limit of 2 lakh, then go with 1 lakh and there you fulfill the condition of both, because 2 lakh is the limit, right? You can always accommodate in 1 lakh, 2 lakh is the maximum limit. That is how you apply both the rules harmoniously with one another, right? We'll take you with the examples as well when we are dealing with these rules in detail, but now you just need to know, okay, when we are talking about harmonious construction, right, we are taking two different sections, two different law, two different rules, and we are combining it to agree, right, to one particular statement with that. Next you have the rules of beneficial construction, right? And when we talk about beneficial construction, you have to see what was the mischief behind. What did you want to override? And hence what was the intention, right? So you have to give a particular, the intention was to give a particular benefit to somebody, right? Then you will interpret it in certain way that yes, the benefit is being given, right? Then you have rule number 5, that is the rule of exceptional construction, right? Over here there are things that is generally used in one context, but over here as an exception you will have to use in a reverse context, right? The best example for this would be like may, right? May is kind of an optional situation for you, right? Shall is mandatory, right? So when we're using shall, maybe at some point of time that is not mandatory, that is maybe an optional thing for you, and may becomes mandatory at situation, depending upon how do you interpret the entire text and how it actually needs to be interpreted, right? Yeah, this is something difficult you must be thinking right now, but when we go ahead with it and we link it to the text which is before the may or shall and the text which are included after that, and you know that okay, if we are going in this context, right, then we don't actually have an option, but may is used, so it becomes mandatory, right? We'll come to detail about that as well, right? Don't be confused and don't be tensed about that. Rule number 6, the last rule in the primary rule, is the rule of Ejusdem Generis, right? Now what is Ejusdem Generis? This is like if you have certain words, right, you have certain examples, and then you have etc. over there, so certain specific term with a general term, then this general term will always mean that okay, you are talking in context of the words, specific words that were used before the general word, right? That is the rule of Ejusdem Generis, and we'll see it when we are studying about it in detail. So the 6 rules that we have is the rule of literal construction, reasonable construction, harmonious construction, beneficial construction, exceptional construction, and the last one is the Ejusdem Generis, right? And then you have 3 secondary rules as well. Now these are the terminologies that you really face difficulty with, right? As a student, even I faced a lot of difficulty with these terminologies. It was difficult to remember, right? Because these are not your English language, and since we are not used to using these words, right, it becomes really difficult for us. And you must be thinking, why haven't I shown the name so far? Because again, some of you may get a panic attack looking at those names, right? They're literally difficult, right? But if you go on practicing the word, repeating it after me, you get to learn it, right? And the spellings are not so difficult with it. So the first rule in the secondary rules we have is noscitur asausis. Now what is noscitur asausis, right? You don't know the meaning of noscitur, you don't know the meaning of saucis, and when you combine it, it is noscitur asausis. It's like something Greek somebody is talking, right, and that is just a bouncer for you. So don't try to get into the meaning of these words, right? But what you need to understand is, what does this rule mean? So this rule actually, the noscitur associus says that if there is a word and you need to interpret that word, then you will interpret it in context of the other words which is used along with it. And the best example for this would be plant and machinery or plant and animal. If I give you plant, right, it becomes really difficult for you to think, oh, which one is it? If you go by the rule of literal construction, it is the plant, the biology kingdom over there, right? But again, if you look at from your accounting and your conceptual or actually your technical language point of view, it is plant and machinery. These are the plants in your accounting statement, right? So you'll always have to interpret it along with the other words that are used. Are we using animal or are we using machinery? That is how you construct what plant is, right? So that is the meaning of the rule, right? Noscitur associus. Don't go by reading these words individually, right? Just go in a flow. Noscitur associus. Repeat it after me. Noscitur associus, and you will remember the words, right? Next, this is one of the most difficult words, right? Here you have 5 words over there. So this is expressio unis est exclusio altarius. Difficult to remember, right? It is. So what I used to do, you know what I used to do is I used to think, okay, if I get a question on this and if I see there are 5 difficult words in the question, I know it's this rule, right? Because again, you have other words also which you do not understand, like Ejusdem, Generis, noscitur associus, and one that will follow right now, right? But none of them have 4-5 words associated with them. It's just 3 or 2, that's it. So if you have 5 difficult words that you don't understand, you know this is what you have to write in the exam, right? So don't worry if you're not able to pronounce it, because you don't have to pronounce it over there, you have to use it, right? Learn the spelling, just use the text, right? I'll pronounce it once more so that you can repeat after me and try to understand the pronunciation, right? It's expressio unis est exclusio altarius. It seems like something magical spell, right, in the Harry Potter that you use. Expressio unis est exclusio altarius. Like you have to be very specific, otherwise either you rotate your wand or not, the magic won't work, the spell won't work, right? You have to be specific with the words. It's like the Wingardium Leviosa, remember? Yeah, the Harry Potter fan, those are there. So it's expressio unis est exclusio altarius. It's like a magical spell that I'm teaching you, right? Learn the words like that. And when you start using it, right, and when you meet your friends, you use this word, they'll go crazy. Like, what are you saying, man? Are you studying the same CA syllabus that we are? Right? Because people generally leave these chapters, right? Because this is actually a little difficult chapter if you think that, okay, we are getting either 4 or 0 marks over there. So why do we study so much, or why do you work hard? But the people who are actually targeting to score good, they do it. And people who are just targeting to pass, they leave it, right? And I hope all of you who are watching these videos, you are preparing to score good, right? So you are with me and we'll study this chapter from scratch to end, right? Now you have the last secondary rule. Again, some Greek word over there, right? Which is, it's contemporaneous expositio. It's not tio, right? If you use expositio, it is the US language, US English that you're using. But we basically follow the UK English, so it is contemporaneous expositio, right? So just try to remember the 3 secondary rules, the words. I'll repeat it once more for you. Number 1 rule is noscitur associus. Number 2, expressio unis est exclusio altarius. And number 3, contemporaneous expositio. Right? So if it is easy for me to use, it is easy for you also to use. Both of us are Indian, right? We have the same bent of our tongue, we have the same language we speak, and these languages are Greek to all of us, right? We are on the common platform, but if I can do it, you can also do it. Oh, did I explain the meaning of expressio unis est exclusio altarius? I think I didn't. Okay, I'll give you the meaning. So this long word, it has to say just 5 words. The meaning also ends up in 5 words. That is, if you are using one word, or if you are using few words, that means you are excluding the rest. This is the totality what you mean to say, because you are not using general words like etc. over there. right? If you have used 3 words, that means we'll construct that, yeah, you mean only those 3, not the rest in their family, right? Not the general terms like that. If you have made a rule for 3 individual words, then we will construct the rule only for those 3 words. That is the meaning of expressio unis est exclusio altarius, right? And then you have contemporaneous expositio. Now this is basically used when the law was drafted long back, right? And the meaning of the law was although okay for that time period or the time zone when it was enacted, but today it becomes ambiguous, right? Like in 1956, the Companies Act 1956, you used to say that okay, when we hold the board meeting, people have to be personally present, right? But now what we construct that, right? How do we interpret it? That okay, even if they are present on video conferencing, we say they are personally present, right? Why? Because in 1956 you had no clue about what video conferencing is. But now again 2013 Act has come up and they have already included it into their definition that okay, any audiovisual conferencing and everything where you can identify the directors and everything, that is okay. That will be applicable, right? And that was not included in the law that was framed by 1956 Act. But we still used to interpret it that way. That okay, because you know, before 2013, didn't we hold board meetings on video conferencing system? We did, right? How did we used to do that? How did we agree to that common parlance that yes, this will be considered to be a meeting? Because we used this rule to interpret that statute, the rule of contemporaneous expositio, right? So now basically I think you are clear with the 9 rules that we have to study. This is just the basic, right? But even if you know the basic, you are good to go. That means if you get a question, right, I'll give you a trick, right, at the end, not now. I'm not giving you right now. Once you have to go with me throughout the class, right, throughout the chapter, and at the end I'll give you tip. No, I will not give it to you at the end. Some of you will directly go to the last class. I'll give you the tip somewhere in between. I'll not say where, right? So that if you don't know exactly what you need to write in the exam based on these rules, right, I'll just give you 5 common lines that you use in all the answer and just 1 line changes. Yeah, that sounds like a trick, right? I'll give it to you. You can use that in the examination and you get right. You get your marks over there, right? But again, there are some other content also from this chapter, right, where you use the internal or external aid to interpretation. Those have to be explained separately. That trick will work only if you get a question based on any of these 9 rules. Okay? So, should we start with dealing with the rules specifically now? Or do we lack some time? Because if we start with the rule, right, it is gonna take around 15 minutes for us. Like 12 to 15 minutes, each rule, right? So 15 minutes more in this lecture would be a little burden on you. Let me do one thing. I'll end the lecture over here with these rules, with the basics, all there in your mind with you. Just go on practicing these terms. Once they are on your tongue, come back and we will move on with explaining each rule individually. Right, and I'll try that I take up at least 2 rules per lecture, right, and at the end we wind up all the 3 rules. So you'll have around 3 to 4 classes, right? In 4 classes we'll wind up all the 9 rules, and then we'll go on to the internal or intrinsic aid to interpretation of statute. Right, with it you'll enjoy the chapter. Literally, like you have been doing law for so long, you have been studying all the other chapters, the SEBI, the FEMA, banking, SERFASI, right, all those things, law everywhere. This is something you'll enjoy, right? This is not the basic sections that you have to remember and what the section says. No, this is something you need to understand and you need to implement, you need to apply, right? This chapter is fun for you, right? So on that note, I'll be leaving you people for the class today, right? I'll catch you guys back in the next lecture, so please stay tuned till then. For the time being, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you and bye-bye.